Hey guys, so today we are going to take a look at this pendulum swing. Pretty simple stuff, in comparison to what we do. We only have one attribute that we're affecting. So I'm going to add a little challenge to this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have this be we're going to do multiple frame rates with this. So we're going to start off with a 24 frames per second color matte. So go ahead and get your two objects in there and go ahead and make a new color matte. And let's make sure it's set to the 1920 by 1080, just HD, and have it be 24 frames a second. Press OK. And let's call this 24 frames per second. Make sure you name it 24 frames a second. 24 FPS. Just drag it on in, drag in your keyframes, and drag in your pendulum. And I'm just going to make this big enough to fit the pendulum so I don't have to rescale that. And I'll scale this up. And I'll just reduce the opacity a little bit here so I can see it better. It's too big. All right, position this right about here. Pull it up. Okay, so if you want to see what I've got here, I've got my thing set here at about 357, and it's positioned at 1717 and 540 here. So, right, so 546. Okay, so this is what I got here. It's scaled at 357%, and it's at 1717.8 X and then 546Y. So if you want to, just type those in, you can. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my pendulum here, get my motion going on, and I'm just going to grab the anchor point, and I'm going to drag the anchor point downwards to where it's on top of the pendulum here. Now you notice the pendulum itself is moving, the anchor point is moving. That's because we get all of our information as far as the position goes based on the anchor point. So if you change where the anchor point is, it's going to change how it, where it's situated. So they're keeping the position the same because the position is in relation to the center of the object. Now we've moved the anchor point, so we just need to reposition the object itself. So let's just pull that up here. So I've got it set to 102 right there. So 960, 102. All right, so our only attribute we're going to be affecting is the rotation here. So let's go get that going. And our first keyframe is going to be over this way. And once again, just, put some music on and to see if you can't copy each keyframe. So go over one per keyframe, one step per keyframe. Okay, so I'm going to stop before I get to the first keyframe. I'm going to leave that blank because we're going to have it when we repeat everything. So I'm just going to kind of shrink this down, and I'm going to make this invisible for now. And I'll make this. I'll just reproduce it. Hold down Alt and drag it. Right click, triple delete. I'll just do the same thing. Alt, drag. Alt, drag. Alt, drag. One more time. So maybe like 5 seconds and like change. Okay, so let's take a look at how this looks. All right, so that's fine. That's cool, right? It looks nice. All right, so what we'll do now is we're going to create a new version of this, right? So let's go ahead and make a new sequence. And we'll have it HDV 1080p 24. Or if you don't see that, then what you can do is you can just exit everything out, and you can just add a new color matte, and just once again 1920 by 1080, or you can just use the previous color matte you had before, 24 frames per second, and pull this in. Wait, wrong. And we'll rename this we'll call it 12 frames per second, even though it's not 12 frames per second. We can even call it 48. We can call it 48 frames per second. We're actually, our keyframes are going to be moving at half the speed. Well, yeah, half the speed. So essentially, we're going to be doing the same thing, but we're going to be separating it by 2. We're just going to advance the keyframe twice. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my 24 frames per second sequence here. Click on this, and I'm going to get my pendulum swing, and I'll go ahead and yeah, sure, I'll copy this too. Go back to 48. Make sure I can copy this. So just right click on it, copy it, and we'll come back to 48, and we'll paste it there. So it's still 24 frames a second. So essentially what I'm going to extend this out a little bit. So we've got a couple options here. We could redo all the keyframes. That's one option. Or we could just sort of separate them off, by 1, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually see if I can't sort of expand this out a little bit. My control tip. I'm going to expand this out by simply selecting all my keyframes bit by bit and just sort of moving them over 1 frame right here, right? So let's see if I can't get this to where, so you can actually place the frames between the frames, but I'm gonna see if I can line it up between each keyframe here. So go ahead and just one by one, we're gonna separate that one, and then we're just gonna do the same thing with the rest. So one by one, we're going to lose a keyframe here, and we're trying to make them as equidistant as we possibly can here. So okay, so we can see here that we've got the same motion, but it takes about twice the time. So I'm going to see if I can pull this over to be about, let's see if I can make it maybe 10 seconds long here. And you'll see why in a second. Should be enough. All right. Okay, so the first thing you might always like, well, this is obviously going to be, half the speed, so it's going to be a lot slower. All right, we compare the way it moves to this one here. Let me just take away this. Take away the pendulum swing here, so we can kind of watch this move. Like watch it as it goes back and forth. And then we can come over here and we can watch this go. All right. Okay, so the reason why we're doing this is because I'm going to show you something. So let's go ahead and create a new sequence, and it's going to be 24 frames a second. So I'll just take my color mat, and I'll pull out the 24 frames a second color mat here, and let's name this sequence comparison. And we're going to bring our 2 sequences out into the timeline here. So I'll bring out my 24 frames a second, and I'll just put that there. That lasts about 5 seconds. We'll pull this up to 10 seconds here. And we'll take out our 48 frames a second, and we'll put that here. The idea is that with this, you get some smoother transitions. This is the idea between like different frame rates here. So let's go ahead and just kind of keep the 2. Let's keep it like the normal speed here. I'm just going to go ahead and just export it. But before we do that, let me just do something real quick. I'm just going to export this. Export media. And let's make sure we know where we're putting it. Place it in my videos. And let's name it something. Let's name it something like pendulum swing video. All right, and then just gonna export that. Shouldn't take very long. And while that's happening, go ahead and open up Photoshop. Go to your Adobe, your AV Lab icons or AV Lab icons folder, and find Adobe Photoshop. It's gonna be towards the bottom of the list. Photoshop shortcut. Make sure you know where your pendulum video is. So mine's under videos. So just make sure you locate where your pendulum swing is. So Pendulum swing. Here we go, pendulum swing video. All right, so with this opened, what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Import, Video Frames to Layers, much the way we did the frame to a GIF here, frame to a GIF. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to put this in, make this into a GIF here. So let's go to Pendulum swing video. Just press OK. And we'll just go here to File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. And we'll give this a moment to set up. The whole idea when it comes to making a video into a GIF, you know, this is how those animated ads pop up on the websites. They're not actually a video, it's going to be an image, because the image is going to just take up less space, you know, in terms of the memory on your bandwidth and stuff. Okay, so now that it's done loading, that's going to take a second here. I'm going to take its size and reduce it down to about 50%. And as soon as I click off of this, it's going to give it a second. It's going to take a moment to load. So press save, and we'll see if we can place it near about the same place as we did before, and we'll call it Pendulum Swing GIF. And just press save. And give that a second to save. Okay, and so we see here that now we've just created this bog standard image that's animated, and it sort of speeds up at 24 frames a second, then it goes down, it goes up to 48 frames a second. So we kind of see the smoother animation here between the two. So this is the difference between using the keyframes in a frame by frame versus actually animating them in between everything. So go ahead and just submit the GIF. So, create this into an image and then submit the GIF. That way I can kind of see it just in the browser, and that'd be kind of easy for me. All right, cool. Well, cannot wait to see you guys produce. See you in class.